It's really quite something to think about, isn't it?
What's that?
That Pakistan might have been just, what, 2 screwdriver turns away from a nuclear weapon back in 1986.
Yeah, that's way before the 98 tests everyone remembers.
Exactly. And A.Q. Khan even claimed they were ready in 84.
Wow.
It just really shows how long this nuclear ambition has been, well, shaping things, especially with India.
It really does reframe it. It wasn't just a sudden decision, was it? More like a long-term strategic goal, decades in the making.
Absolutely. And understanding that history is key to grasping the situation now.
For sure.
So for this deep dive, we're really getting into the weeds of Pakistan's nuclear doctrine, their strategy.
Right.
We've got a pretty detailed analysis to work from, and the idea is to pull out the core insights, give everyone a clear picture, especially how it all ties back to India.
And it's not just academic, is it? Understanding this. Well, it matters for anyone following geopolitics, proliferation history, or just the tensions in South Asia. It's pretty fundamental.
Totally. We'll look at the military goals, the political ones, the actual doctrine, or what we can figure out about it, and what they see as essential for their deterrence.
And just so folks know, we're drawing heavily on an analysis called Pakistan's Nuclear Doctrine and Strategy. So it's grounded in some solid research.
Okay, let's unpack this. A central theme seems to be this feeling in Pakistan. This need to address the power imbalance with India, the geophysical and structural asymmetry.
That's a key driver. This sense of disadvantage, it runs deep. Abdul Sattar pointed out, right from independence, Pakistan felt it started behind India. Less capital, weaker institutions, fewer resources.
Right. And they tried other things first, didn't they? Alliances with the U.S., China, building up conventional forces.
They did, but ultimately it seems they saw nuclear weapons as the real equalizer. The most effective one, anyway.
Zulfikar Ali Bhutto saw this really early, apparently. Back in '65, even.
Yeah, he was pushing for it. And then the '71 war, that defeat really pushed the nuclear program front and center. Became a major priority.
It's interesting they mentioned the Thatcher quote about nukes letting smaller countries stand up to bigger ones. Puts it in a wider context.
It does. It's a recurring theme, isn't it? States feeling conventionally weaker see nukes as the ultimate security guarantee.
And Bhutto didn't just see it militarily, did he? He thought it was important for Pakistan's science, technology, challenging India there too.
Exactly. It was about prestige, national development, not just bombs.
And they were quite strategic, using the nuclear program itself to bargain.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially with the U.S. after India's tests in '74. Kind of like, help us with conventional arms or we'll just double down on nukes.
That's a great way to put it. They play the Cold War dynamics very skillfully, leveraging U.S. strategic interests against India.
Okay, so turning to the military objectives, this strategic equalizer idea is central, tied to that history of feeling weaker than India.
It's the foundation, really. But it goes beyond just balancing conventional forces. They see nukes as the ultimate deterrent against a big conventional war with India.
An infrangible guarantee of independence, they call it. That's strong language.
It is. And it suggests they believe this nuclear shield gives them leeway, room to pursue other policies, maybe even revisionist ones, like regarding Kashmir.
That links to Kargil, doesn't it? The analysis suggests Pakistan thought their nuclear status would deter a strong Indian conventional response.
And attract international attention, yes. Though, as we know, that involves some significant miscalculations on their part.
Definitely. And it seems they still believe, to some extent, that nukes shield them from major conventional attacks while they engage in, well, sub-conventional warfare.
That's a really critical aspect. The nukes are seen as providing immunity, allowing for more aggressive strategies below that nuclear threshold, particularly concerning Kashmir.
And the analysis points out that insurgency in J&K increased after Pakistan got the bomb in '89.
The timing is certainly suggestive, yeah. It lends weight to that connection.
This idea that just threatening to approach the nuclear threshold stops India taking the initiative, that feels like walking a tightrope.
It's absolutely high-stakes brinkmanship. It relies on creating uncertainty, fear, in India's planning.
Which is very different from India's position, right? India insists there's space for limited conventional war below the threshold.
Exactly. And that difference, that ambiguity about where the threshold actually is, that's where the danger lies. Huge potential for miscalculation.
Okay. And then there's the classic role, deterring the other side's nukes, mutual assured destruction.
Right. The traditional MAD concept.
And Pakistan is clearly working on a second strike capability for that.
Essential for stable deterrence. Making sure you can hit back even if you get hit first.
Okay, let's shift to the political goals. It sounds like disappointment with allies played a big role here.
A very big role. Pakistan invested a lot in alliances U.S.-China. But in the wars with India, 65, 71, even Kargil in 99, that support wasn't unconditional military help.
They found out the allies wouldn't actually fight alongside them against India.
Pretty much. So the conclusion was the only real guarantee of security, of survival, was their own nuclear capability.
Which explains why they went ahead with the tests in '98, even when the U.S. offered aid packages.
Precisely. The U.S. couldn't offer that ironclad military guarantee against India. Plus, China gave some assurances, and they probably figured the nuclear flashpoint angle could squeeze concessions out of the U.S. anyway.
And with India's relationships with the U.S. and China evolving, Pakistan might feel even more reliant on its nukes now.
That's a definite possibility the analysis raises, yeah.
Beyond security, the program seems tied up with nation-building, prestige.
Oh, definitely. Bhutto wanted to rally the nation after the 71 loss. Project Strength. Musharraf called it a unique national success story.
Kahuta became a symbol of defiance, national pride.
Right, mastering enrichment technology. It meant a lot symbolically.
Brahma Chalani's point is interesting. Pakistan showed how sheer nationalism could drive a less wealthy country to get the bomb.
It really underscores that power of national will, doesn't it?
Now, here's an irony the analysis notes. Bhutto maybe saw the program partly as a civilian check on the military.
But it ended up reinforcing military control.
Exactly. Zia-ul-Haq shifted control firmly to the military, and it stayed there.
Civilian leaders like Benazir Bhutto reportedly had very limited say in nuclear matters, even as prime minister.
And the army uses the rivalry with India to justify its grip on the economy, politics, and especially nuclear policy.
It's a key part of how they maintain their dominance, yes.
Then there's the Islamic bomb idea, using nukes to claim leadership in the Muslim world.
That was definitely part of the narrative early on. Framing it as a capability for the whole Ummah helped get political and, importantly, financial support from Saudi Arabia, Libya, Iran.
Zia talked about reinforcing the power of the Muslim world in '78. Sharif echoed it after the '98 tests.
Yes, those statements were quite explicit.
But that angle seems much less prominent now, post 9/11, the AQ Khan network.
Exactly. The focus shifted towards projecting responsibility, calming international fears. The Islamic bomb rhetoric got dialed way back.
Though the analysis suggests maybe they only shared limited, older tech anyway, partly to keep their unique status as the only Muslim nuclear power.
That's a plausible interpretation, yeah. Maintaining exclusivity while managing proliferation risks.
Okay, let's dive into the doctrine itself. The big word seems to be ambiguity.
That's the defining feature. Unlike India, Pakistan hasn't published an official, detailed doctrine.
Why not?
Well, it's common for nuclear states, actually. It keeps adversaries guessing, maximizes uncertainty about your capabilities, your red lines. Agha Shahi said ambiguity was best for Pakistan's security because it raises India's risk calculation.
Keeps India on edge.
Essentially, yes. But even without an official document, we can piece together the main contours from statements' writings.
Okay, so what are the key elements we can see? First up, minimum nuclear deterrence.
Right. Officially, like India and China, they talk about minimum deterrence. Nawaz Sharif said it back in '99, but
There's always a but.
the but is how they define minimum. It's not just a small number of bombs. It's about having the quality and the will, a perceived no-holds-barred approach if things get really bad with India.
So minimum isn't fixed. It depends on India's capabilities.
Exactly. It's dynamic. The goal is assured destruction capability. Parity means being able to inflict unacceptable damage in retaliation, not necessarily having the same number of warheads.
General Mahmoud Durrani even suggested building an overkill to guarantee that.
Right, to make the deterrent absolutely credible in their eyes.
Okay, now the really thorny part. The first use policy.
This is probably the most critical difference from India's doctrine. Given their conventional inferiority and lack of strategic depth, not much land buffer, Pakistan explicitly keeps the option of using nuclear weapons first.
If they feel the state's survival is threatened in a conventional war.
Precisely. Air Commodore Tariq Mahmoud Ashraf argued it was essential for national survival. They see it as leveling the playing field if they're facing conventional defeat.
They're compared to NATO during the Cold War, right?
Yes, contouring the larger Warsaw Pact forces, which is why they've always rejected India's no first-use proposals. LT General Sardar Lodi said NFU would just lock in India's conventional advantage.
But first use doesn't necessarily mean launching nukes the moment a war starts.
No, that's a crucial nuance. It's more about projecting a lower threshold for nuclear use to deter certain Indian actions in the first place. Make India think twice before launching a major conventional offensive.
Have they defined those thresholds?
They have, historically. Leaders mention things like comprehensive military defeat, threats to major cities or communication links, economic strangulation, losing large chunks of territory or forces.
But they're vaguer now.
Yes. There's been more silence on specific red lines recently. Jendrasad Durrani suggested revealing exact triggers would reveal conventional weaknesses. Back to ambiguity.
So be vague enough to deter India conventionally, but keep the sub-conventional options open.
That seems to be the strategy, though LT Gen Javed Hassan pointed out the risky logic there may be needing to provoke India into escalating more just to justify Pakistan's own nuclear use. Very dangerous.
And this all rests on assumptions, doesn't it? That India lacks the political will for massive retaliation, that the world will step in quickly, that their own second strike capability is robust.
Huge assumptions. If any of those are wrong, the consequences are unthinkable. It's a stark contrast to India's focus, which is preventing deterrence breakdown altogether.
And it's not just about deterring an Indian nuclear attack. They might use nukes against a conventional attack, too.
If they feel their conventional defenses are about to collapse, yes. That's part of the doctrine. LT Gen Lodi stated that explicitly.
So Pakistan sees a more direct military role for nukes than India does.
It appears so. India sees them more as political psychological tools. Shireen Mazari's one-rung escalation ladder idea captures Pakistan's view a more integrated, almost operational role in extreme circumstances.
Which leads to this offensive-defense concept. Nukes as both an offensive threat, say over Kashmir early in a crisis, and the ultimate defense against Indian retaliation.
It creates a significant doctrinal gap with India, absolutely. A different philosophy on the utility of nuclear weapons.
Okay, let's talk about what Pakistan needs to make this deterrence work. First, the force can't be too small.
Right. Even with minimum deterrence, if your force looks vulnerable to being wiped out in a first strike, it doesn't deter anyone. So survivability is key.
They need a credible second strike capability.
Absolutely essential. They might have initially relied on ambiguity or, existential deterrence, but now it's about proving they can retaliate.
And they're worried about India's missile defense, even if it's limited.
Yes, that's a major concern for them. They fear BMD could make India feel safer, maybe more willing to risk a conventional strike, thinking they could intercept Pakistan's retaliation. Given Pakistan's lack of strategic depth, that's a big worry.
Things like the S-300 Akash system.
Exactly. They worry it could create preemptive impulses in India.
So Pakistan's response is likely, what? Build their own defenses and build more offensive missiles to overwhelm India's?
That's the logical path. More missiles, maybe more sophisticated ones, decoys. Musharraf talked about accelerating the program significantly back in 2005.
And China might help with that.
It's certainly possible, yes. Bolstering both offensive and potentially defensive capabilities.
Second requirement, weapons need to be capable of quick assembly.
Yes. Musharraf said they're kept disassembled. But what that means is ambiguous.
Could mean anything from the core stored miles away to just needing a final connection on the launch pad.
Right. The analysis suggests it's likely closer to the latter. Maybe cores stored separately but near readily mountable frames or missiles, ready to go relatively quickly.
Which makes sense with the first use doctrine. You might need them fast in a conventional crisis.
Precisely. If they felt defeat was imminent, time would be absolutely critical.
Third, they need diversified weapons, HEU and plutonium-based.
Initially, they focused on plutonium via CAN-UPP, but getting reprocessing tech was hard.
So they shifted to highly enriched uranium, HEU.
Largely thanks to AQ-Khan and those stolen centrifuge designs, yes. Kahuta is the main enrichment site, plus newer ones near Wa.
And the 98 tests were mostly HEU.
Mostly low-yield HEU fission devices, it seems. Though the sixth test might have been plutonium. They likely have at least two basic designs, one for aircraft delivery, one maybe Chinese origin for missiles, and miniaturization for missile warheads is key.
Needing about a 500-kilogram payload capacity.
Roughly.
Okay, and then the controversial one, tactical nuclear weapons, TNWs.
Officially denied by some, like General Kidwai. But others, like Brigadier Saeed Ismat, have argued strongly for them.
Why? What's the argument?
To use against invading forces on the battlefield, not cities, but troop concentrations. to stop a conventional breakthrough, especially given the lack of geographic depth. It's called their military doctrine of necessity.
It really pushes towards the conventionalization of nuclear weapons, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Blurs that line significantly.
Fourth requirement, credible delivery systems.
Yeah.
They started with aircraft.
F-16s, Mirages, A-5s, yes. Modified for the role. But aircrafts are vulnerable, slower.
So they shifted to missiles, especially after the Pressler Amendment cut off U.S. aid.
Big shift then. A.Q. Khan helped get North Korean Nodongs the Gauri, and their own defense complex developed the solid-fuel hot fuse.
Likely based on Chinese M11s.
Seems likely. The Ghaznavi HAF-3 is operational and nuclear capable.
And they're working on longer-range missiles, Shaheen, Gauri.
Shaheen-1 is operational. Shaheen-2, Gauri-2 under testing. Plus the Babur cruise missile, and maybe even longer-range Gauri-3, potentially linked to North Korea's Taipodong.
The focus seems to be on mobility, dispersion, concealment.
Exactly. Survivability. Being able to launch from remote areas, hit deep into India.
And finally, the fuel. Accumulation of fissile material. This is murky.
Very murky. No confirmed figures. ISIS and others give estimates suggesting significant HEU stocks and growing plutonium. Enough for a sizable arsenal, potentially.
And they want more, to match India.
That appears to be the goal, which is why they strongly oppose a fissile material cutoff treaty in FMCT, unless it deals with existing stockpiles and asymmetries. They want verification and reduction of current stocks, not just a future ban.
And they're boosting plutonium production, Kushab reactor.
Yes, the Kushab reactor, built with Chinese help, operates outside safeguards. It's a significant plutonium source. They built a second, larger reactor there, too.
Though reprocessing the spent fuel might be the bottleneck?
Could be. Building reactors is one thing. Extracting the plutonium efficiently is another. But the intent to produce more plutonium is clear.
Okay, wow. That's a lot of components. Let's talk about the uncertainties. The scenarios where deterrence might actually fail.
Right. The paradox of deterrence.
Yeah.
You have to be ready for it to break down. And Pakistan's approach, projecting potential irrationality, this risk maximizing.
The quote about taking the enemy down with them if they face conventional defeat.
Exactly. That kind of brinkmanship is inherently risky. Miscalculation, misinterpretation. It could easily spiral.
And if you threaten nukes but don't use them effectively, it could weaken the deterrent later, like the U.S. and Korea.
That's the danger, undermining the bomb's mystique.
So what are the potential scenarios for actual use? The analysis lays out a few. Premeditated attack.
Highly unlikely. They probably lack the capability for a disarming first strike, and the retaliation would be devastating. Plus, assuming total irrationality at the top is a stretch, unless, maybe, some radical group took control, also unlikely given command structures like the SPD.
Okay, what about accident or miscalculation? That feels more plausible.
It's a serious concern. Command and control failures, delegation issues, human error, or misreading an Indian conventional strike as an attack on their nuclear forces, leading to a panicked launch.
Or just flawed military thinking, like Kargil.
Yes. The risk of military misadventure escalating, driven by overconfidence or misjudgment, is real.
Then there's use out of desperation or despair.
If they truly felt the state was collapsing under conventional attack,
Yeah.
facing utter defeat, that's a terrifying scenario. The retired general talking about wanting a fresh start after a nuclear war.
Chilling.
Which is why India clearly stating limited objectives in any conflict would be crucial. Absolutely. Avoid triggering that existential panic. Ultimately, Pakistan needs to shift its focus away from just countering India. But that's a long-term challenge.
And the final nightmare, terrorists getting hold of nuclear material or a weapon.
Right. Either through clandestine transfer by rogue elements, or terrorists acquiring material perhaps via links with retired scientists.
Yeah.
Maybe building a dirty bomb, an RDD.
Or even attacking a nuclear facility itself, causing contamination, panic.
That's another serious threat. It would test deterrence in a whole new way. Requires robust civil defense in India, continued international pressure on Pakistan for nuclear safety.
So wrapping this up, the key takeaway is that nukes are seen as absolutely fundamental to Pakistan's survival, baked into their national identity, reinforced by the military's narrative about India.
Exactly. Their policy is rational in its own way, but deliberately ambiguous, aiming to deter India with a low threshold, maybe draw in international help. First use, improving survivability. That's the core strategy.
And for listeners understanding this nuclear psyche, it's crucial. India needs to be cautious, take escalation risks seriously, but not be completely paralyzed by Pakistan's posture.
Absolutely. India needs strong deterrence, better civil defense against non-state threats, and continued diplomatic engagement, especially urging the U.S. to keep pressure on Pakistan regarding safety and security.
So here's something to ponder. Given how deeply embedded nukes are in Pakistan's identity and their ongoing aims regarding Kashmir, what are the real long-term prospects for stability? What kind of diplomacy, what strategies could actually make the region safer?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. But hopefully this deep dive into the doctrine itself provides a foundation for thinking about those huge challenges.